The sun hung low over the jagged horizon of the Montana Badlands, painting the sky in strokes of crimson and gold, as if the heavens themselves were bleeding out the last remnants of a forsaken day. In the shadow of a weathered ranch house, where the wind whispered secrets through the creaking timbers, a lone cowboy named Jack Harlan stood frozen, his calloused hands trembling as he faced the widow Eliza Thorne. Her eyes, once bright with the fire of youth, now held the hollow ache of endless nights spent grieving a husband taken too soon by the fever that swept through the valley like a thief in the night. Jack's voice broke the silence, raw and desperate, as he whispered those words that would forever alter the course of their shattered lives. "I'd give 10 herds for one night in your arms." It was a confession born not of lust, but of a love so profound it had simmered and spoken for years, hidden beneath the dust of cattle drives in the veil of propriety in a land where hearts were as rugged as the terrain. If you believe in the power of kindness and the beauty of second chances, hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of love's resilience, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more stories that touch the soul. Jack Harlan had ridden the trails of the American West since he was old enough to grip a saddle horn, his life a tapestry woven from the threads of hardship and fleeting joys. Born to a family of drifters who chased the promise of open land after the Civil War, he learned early that survival meant hardening one's spirit against the relentless assault of nature and fate. By his mid-30s, Jack had built a modest empire of cattle, herding them across vast prairies where the grass whispered under the hooves and the stars overhead seemed close enough to pluck like silver coins from the sky. But beneath his sun-leathered exterior lay a man haunted by loneliness, a void that no amount of whiskey or campfire tales could fill. He had watched friends marry and build families, only to see them crumble under the weight of droughts, rustlers, or the simple cruelty of time. Jack's own heart had been scarred young, when a stampede claimed his brother, leaving him to carry the burden of unfulfilled promises and regrets that echoed in the quiet hours before dawn. Yet, in the small town of Willow Creek, nestled against the foothills where the river bent like a lover's arm, he found his gaze drawn repeatedly to Eliza Thorne, the widow whose strength masked a fragility that mirrored his own. Eliza's world had shattered 2 years prior, on a stormy autumn evening when her husband, Thomas, succumbed to the fever that ravaged the frontier settlements. Thomas had been a steady man, a homesteader who tamed the wild earth with plow and patience, building a life for them on the ranch that now stood as a monument to their shared dreams. They had no children, a quiet sorrow that Eliza buried deep, channeling her energy into tending the land that had once promised abundance but now yielded only thorns and memories. Widowed at 28, she faced the merciless judgment of a community where a woman alone was seen as both vulnerable and a temptation, whispers following her like shadows as she bartered for supplies in town or rode out to mend fences under the unforgiving sun. The ranch teetered on the edge of ruin, debts mounting from failed crops and the cost of hiring hands who eyed her with pity or predation. Eliza's days blurred into a monotonous struggle, her hands blistered from labor, her nights filled with the ghost of Thomas's touch, a warmth she feared she would never feel again. Yet, in her quiet resilience, she embodied the unyielding spirit of the West. Rising each morning to face the dawn, even as grief clawed at her insides like a trapped animal seeking escape. Their paths had crossed often in the rhythms of frontier life, Jack's cattle drives passing through Willow Creek, where he would stop at the general store or lend a hand during branding season. He remembered the first time he truly saw her, not as Thomas's wife, but as Eliza, a woman whose laughter during a town dance lit the room like a lantern in the dark, her dark hair cascading like a river over her shoulders, her eyes holding stories untold. After Thomas's death, Jack's visits became more frequent, masked as neighborly concern, repairing a barn roof after a hailstorm, driving off coyotes that threatened her dwindling herd, or simply sharing a meal by the fire where words were sparse but the silence spoke volumes. He never pushed, respecting the invisible wall of her mourning, but each encounter chipped away at his resolve, revealing the depth of his affection. Eliza, too, felt the stirrings, a warmth that bloomed unexpectedly amid her sorrow, like wildflowers pushing through cracked earth after rain. But doubt plagued her. Was it betrayal to Thomas's memory? Could she risk her heart again in a world that had already taken so much? The challenges mounted as winter approached, a brutal season that tested even the hardiest souls, with blizzards that buried trails and froze livestock in their tracks, forcing Jack and Eliza into closer proximity as survival demanded alliance. As the first snows blanketed the valley, transforming the landscape into a pristine yet perilous wonderland, Jack found himself snowbound at Eliza's ranch after a storm caught him mid-ride. The wind howled like a banshee outside, piling drifts against the door, while inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls like forgotten dreams. They shared stories over cups of steaming coffee, Jack recounting tales of distant lands he'd seen, the red canyons of Arizona, the endless plains of Texas, while Eliza spoke of her girlhood in the East, before the call of adventure drew her westward with Thomas. In these moments, vulnerability emerged, Jack admitting the emptiness that gnawed at him despite his successes, the herds that meant wealth but not fulfillment. Eliza confessed her fears of losing the ranch, the weight of isolation that pressed upon her like the snow on the roof, threatening to collapse everything she held dear. Tension built as unspoken desires simmered, glances lingering longer, touches accidental yet electric, a brush of hands while passing a blanket, a shared look that held the promise of more. But challenges arose, testing their budding connection. Rustlers struck under cover of night, stealing cattle that Jack had helped protect, forcing him to ride out into the storm's aftermath, his body battered by cold and confrontation. Eliza, left alone, wrestled with guilt, questioning if allowing Jack closer invited more loss, her heart a battlefield where love and fear clashed like thunder. Spring thawed the land, melting the snow into rushing streams that mirrored the rush of emotion swelling within them. Jack's herds flourished that season, tenfold what they had been, a bounty born of his tireless efforts and a bit of luck with the markets. Yet, prosperity only amplified his inner turmoil, for what good were riches without someone to share them? He returned to Willow Creek more often, helping Eliza rebuild after the winter's toll, planting new fields, reinforcing the barn, their workdays blending into evenings where the line between friendship and something deeper blurred. Eliza's struggles deepened as creditors circled, demanding payment on old loans, threatening to seize the ranch that was her last tie to Thomas. She labored from dawn to dusk, her body aching, her spirit fraying, moments of despair where she collapsed in the hayloft, tears soaking the straw as she whispered pleas to the empty air. Jack witnessed this, his heart breaking, offering help without strings, but pride held her back, a barrier as formidable as the mountains surrounding them. Suspense mounted during a town festival, where old suitors vied for Eliza's attention, their intentions laced with greed for her land, forcing Jack to confront his feelings amid the swirl of music and lanterns. A heated argument ensued in the shadows, words tumbling out in a rush, accusations of interference, admissions of fear, yet it ended in a tentative understanding, a bridge built over the chasm of their pains. As summer's heat baked the earth, cracking it like aged leather, the turning point arrived during a fierce drought that withered crops and parched the riverbeds. Jack's herds suffered, many lost to thirst, his empire crumbling as he drove them endlessly in search of water. Exhausted and defeated, he arrived at Eliza's door one sweltering evening, dust-caked and hollow-eyed, collapsing into her arms as fever gripped him from the strain. She nursed him through the nights, cooling his brow with damp cloths, her touch a balm that healed more than his body. In those vulnerable hours, barriers dissolved, Jack murmured of his love, not in grand gestures, but in quiet revelations of how she had become his anchor in a drifting world. Eliza, facing her own ranch's peril as the drought claimed her last reserves, found strength in his presence, realizing that love was not a replacement for what was lost, but a new chapter written on the pages of her heart. Change came gradually, like rain after drought, they pooled their resources, Jack selling off herds to pay her debts, their partnership evolving into a union of souls. Challenges persisted. Community gossip, a final rustler raid that tested their resolve, Jack wounded in the fray, Eliza standing guard with rifle in hand, her fear transforming into fierce protectiveness. Through it all, emotion built, a crescendo of hope amid despair, their bond forged in the fire of adversity. By autumn's golden embrace, the ranch bloomed anew, rains returning to quench the thirsty land, mirroring the renewal in their lives. Jack and Eliza stood together on the porch, watching the herds graze peacefully, the weight of past sorrows lifted like morning mist. In that moment, under the same crimson sky that had witnessed his confession, Jack whispered those words again, not as a plea, but as a vow, sealing a love that had triumphed over loss and hardship. Their story became a legend in Willow Creek, a testament to how even in the harshest frontiers, hearts could find solace and second chances, inspiring those around them to embrace vulnerability and kindness. If this story has touched your heart, stirring emotions of love, loss, and redemption, please like, comment, and subscribe to Moments of Love. Your engagement means the world and helps share these tales with more souls in need. Before we end, I'd love for you to comment your favorite line from the story below. It could be the one that made you feel the deepest.